All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order. This meeting's been noticed to Evans Print Media Group, WCOW Radio, Magnum Radio, La Crosse Tribune, Sparta City Hall, and Sparta Free Library. Mr. Russ, are there any changes to the agenda?
No, there are not.
All right. With that, we request a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll make that motion.
And I'll second.
Motion by Mr. McKenna, second by Mr. Hendricks. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Motion passes. All right. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Russ, can you remind us of SASD's mission statement?
Yes, our mission is to educate all students academically, emotionally, and socially to inspire curiosity and resilience.
All right, thank you. Do we have any public input tonight?
I do not believe we have any public input tonight.
All right. No public input. Then we'll move right into agenda items, reports. We have 2A, open enrollment. Ms. Hauser.
Thank you. I'm just giving an update on open enrollment. There's no action items needed, but we did last week finish our third Friday count, which is our first pupil count of the school year. And so we have our initial open enrollment numbers for the year. And I say initial because students may continue to move in and out throughout the year, and it adjusts to actual as time goes on throughout the year. So just a quick reminder, open enrollment in is students who live in a different district, but they decide to attend school in Sparta. Open enrollment out is students who live within the Sparta attendance area, but decide to attend a different district. In January, you approve the number of open enrollment positions we have available for students coming in. And then in May of each year, you approve any applications that we received. The funding that we get for open enrollment students is determined by the state. And so for this year, the amount is on the next slide. So this is saying that the amount of when students open enroll out, we still get to count them in our revenue limit calculation, meaning they get added back to the number of students that we serve within our buildings. And so we receive that 10,000 this year. It's 10,325 per student on the revenue limit, but then we don't get to count on our revenue limit those students who open and enroll in. So basically we take our head count, or the number of students we see in our buildings each day, we add back those who are open enrolled out, and we subtract those who are here but don't live here. And then here's the dollar amount. So for this year, for regular education students, we receive $8,619 a student. And for special education, $13,470, and that's the same amount that we would pay for those students going out. And so this is kind of little. But what it's showing is the number of students. So I'll go through the open enrollment ins first, which are the students getting educated at Sparta. We had 44 regular education and 8 special education. Again, we don't get any revenue limit for those students, but we do get the open enrollment amount per student. And what this equates to is revenue of $487,000. For our open enrollment out students, we had 310 regular ed and 25 special ed. We do get revenue limit for them, which equals approximately $3,450,000. However, we do have to pay the districts that they're attending. That cost this year equals just over $3 million. So we do have a net gain for our open enrollment outs of $450,000. Are there any questions regarding open enrollment?
Yeah, I do. So what's the
threshold for it to be considered a special education student? Just anyone with an IEP, or is there a certain threshold that's standard bearer?
Yep, it would be students with an IEP.
Okay.
Correct.
Questions?
Yeah, I have one. The spreadsheet that has the specifics with the school districts and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Is this accurate that most of the students who open and roll out into Bangor are special ed students?
No, the numbers that were in pink, it includes at least one special education student in that balance.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I understand.
Other questions?
Go ahead.
All right, yes, thank you. When they apply for open enrollment, I believe that we ask what the reason is, but they're not required to provide that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Is there anything that would prevent us from reaching out to them personally with a phone call or something if they choose not to complete that application or answer that question in the application? Are we allowed to do that, or
Are
we
we
not?
are we allowed to?
yes?
I would assume that we could. I can tell you the reason why I say that is because I specifically call all open enrollment that I know of that are going to apply into a virtual school to let them know that we do have our own virtual academy that way. So I do give them a call regardless if they're looking for a virtual option, just to let them know. A lot of them stay with us then, but some of them just say, hey, I'm happy with wherever I'm going right now. So
What percentage answer the question as to why?
last year, I didn't do one this year. Last year we had that. I believe I only had 24 responses and I sent it to, I think, 150 some emails.
And on the graph that Mr. Hendricks was referring to, it indicates some in Appleton area. I'm guessing that those are online type things.
Yes.
I guess I would just ask if it's possible to put as much effort into finding out why students are leaving every year. I can't imagine calling however many hundreds of people who didn't complete that part of the application, but I think that's a key piece that maybe would help the board with some of the decisions that they make moving forward. Thank you.
Can we just go back one slide? I just want to take a look at that.
Sure.
And I want to highlight that slide is not 1 year. Correct, that's the total number?
This is total students, not just new applicants.
New applicants, I just want to make sure that's there, that's total.
I just don't understand what the bottom, the red is getting to. Can we explain that again?
Yeah, so for open enrollment in students, that comes across as revenue. And so that's revenue of the $487,000. For open enrollment out, it comes through as an expense. So if you look on our expenditure listing, you would see that expense of the $3,008,640. And what this is trying to show is that is a very large expense, but we do also get revenue limit to help offset that expense. And in fact, the revenue limit that we receive is more so than the open enrollment. So although we wish they all attended Sparta, we do still receive a net revenue or net income for open enrollment out students.
Thank you.
Mr. McKenna?
I really appreciate the budgetary impact of this, but I'm struggling with the why part. You know, we're basically saying that over 10% of our kids are choosing to go to a different school district outside of Sparta. When you open enroll out, it's actually harder for families than it is to go to the school district where you reside in a lot of cases, not in all. The attachment that Leah sent with the weekly notes this week, you know, it showed that the major reasons why people open and roll out could be anything from daycare to proximity to districts to all kinds of things. But you know, it listed that 12 kids this year chose to go to Cashton. I don't think Cashton moved on the map. I don't think they have any daycare opportunities that we don't have in Sparta. I sure don't think they have more employers than we have in Sparta. So the two things at the bottom, that when I check off all the rest, the two things at the bottom were either people were unhappy with the district they were attending, or they thought that the new district provided opportunities that we don't. I can think of very few things in the district that impact 10% of every kid in our building that we don't prioritize. And it seems like this is something that every year we just take the number and roll over, and it is what it is. This isn't about $3 million to me. This is about 335 opportunities to improve. What are people seeing? What are families seeing that we're missing, and what do we not know? Because we had another 35 opportunities this year to learn what it is we could be better at. I really like Amy's idea of contacting people when they send the application in. When you send an application, it doesn't mean you're going to open and enroll, but it means you're thinking about it. Something is happening to make you think that there are better opportunities. Contacting people after they've already left, the decision's made. I don't know why they would reply. I just see 10% as being entirely too many, and I think this needs to be a lot higher priority for us.
Thank you. Other comments? Yeah, Ashley.
Would it be possible to break it down in terms of like families? How many children per family? I mean, I doubt these are all like single children. You know, how many families, I guess? Is that a possible thing?
I will have to check. I don't personally do this report, so I'll
Sure.
have to verify, but I can let you know.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Anything else from the board? Thank you, Ms. Hauser. Moving on to 2B, review the 23-24 preliminary budget expenditures. Back to Ms. Hauser.
All right. So the budget for the annual meeting was published in today's paper, and it reflects all of the planning that we've talked about really since about January. And it includes the items we talked about at our finance workshop as well as the previous board meeting. But we really haven't talked too much about the expenses for this year in total. We've talked about them through, you know, salary increases that we did in the spring and some board agenda items throughout the summer, but I just wanted to put them all together for you prior to the annual meeting. So if you had any questions or anything, we had the opportunity to review that. So first of all, just starting with a summary. So for Fund 10, the total revenue that we're projecting is $41,585,754. The one item that will be changing before the annual meeting is we will receive our October 15th aid certification, as well as our revenue limit will be finalized. So this amount may change slightly for the annual meeting. As you remember or may recall, we did move back the annual meeting this year to October 19th. so that I would have those amounts finalized. The constituents at last year's annual meeting asked that it be a few days later so that those numbers were known as they were presented at the annual meeting. So total revenue will be updated prior to the 19th. And then total expenses, I do not anticipate changing unless I get board feedback or to do so. But total expenses budgeted $42,160,754, which equals a net loss of $575,000, which is the amount of revenue stabilization or fund balance that the board set aside at the end of the 22-23 school year to help with the budget deficit that we were projecting. For Fund 27, which is special education, these two funds get combined together for our operating budget, so I just wanted to show the total revenue and expenses there. Please note that $3.9 million of that total revenue is a transfer from Fund 10. So when you add together the total expenses of both funds, you would need to back out that transfer to equal our true expenses. Going by category, which is how I present the budget to you throughout the year, which is really by the different cost centers within the district. The red here is salaries and benefits. You can see they again make up about 72% of our total budget, which is exactly where we were at last year. We also have our school budgets, instructional services, student services. Business services is so large because I also manage the budget for open enrollment and for private school vouchers, and those are the largest expenses there, as well as transportation, technology, and buildings and grounds, and then the governance budget. So going in a little bit more detail, contracted pay for this year did increase about $1.1 million. There were a few changes in positions, but really that was the CPI increase that was approved. There were no fundamental changes to the teacher compensation model or any other compensation model. The biggest change was the CPI increase. Non-contracted pay, which is all of those other types of pays, whether it be, whether it be co-curriculars, extra time for professional development, things of that nature, relatively the same as last year. Our substitute budget, we are keeping the same. This is district substitutes that are not through Teachers on Call, so they are our employees, long-term substitutes we do through the district. We did have quite a few long-term substitutes last year for maternity leaves and FMLA reasons, and so we kept that budget the same for this year, knowing that last year it's still conservative. Leave payments are, if an employee leaves, they get a payout of their unused paid leave time, and so we kept that budget the same as well, and then there are some mileage allowances for certain positions in the district. For benefits, when salaries go up, WRS and FICA also go up because they're a percentage of the earnings. The 403B plan is $1,500 an employee based on participation, and this is just currently who has elected that benefit. Health insurance did go up significantly. There was a 10% increase this year, and this is also reflecting actual enrollment with all of our new hires and things like that. Dental insurance, minimal change. HRA correlates with the employees who met our requirements to receive HRA the previous year, but the dollar amount did not change. And then life insurance, long-term disability, and in lieu of benefits, all relatively minor changes. So total benefits increased about $770,000. Our school budgets overall stayed the same. So the building budgets that the principals manage, no change. High school co-curriculars increased slightly for the transportation costs that continue. Student resale, we just adjust to actual throughout the year as activities begin to happen. And then the welding and CNC program historically has always received $30,000 a year. So we're going back to that amount again for this year. Instructional services are managed through the teaching and learning, and those include English language learners, gifted and talented, minimal changes, instructional services, which other than grant funds, this is where we might buy any curriculum or new textbooks, and we do not have any major purchases like that this year. Instructional grants are grant funding that we use for anything other than salaries and benefits. A lot of our professional development and our software costs come out of those grants. And then summer school is just for the supplies to operate summer school. SVLA is being fully funded by the ESSER grant this year, so that is a cost that once we no longer have the ESSER funding will come back onto this budget. And then lastly, we have our ECCP and Start College Now. The participation in that continues to grow every year. Last year it grew pretty significantly, and I'm budgeting for another increase this year, which is great because our students are taking advantage of that really great benefit. And so in total, it looks like we're spending less on instruction, but again, that's because a lot of our grant funding we're using in salaries and benefits rather than purchasing new things. So putting staff with the students versus new textbooks and things of that nature. For student services, this includes health services, which is our school nurses and health aides. And so this is their supplies to operate those health offices. Special education is any cost for special education that's not reimbursed through the federal grants. The big one here is our contracted services through telespeech, which we hire speech pathologists and school psych services. And those we are anticipating increases this year due to various staffing shortages. The student services budget is the remaining cost for our counseling programs, our all of the enrollment, central registrar, all those departments that are not special education but fall under student services. And it looks like I have the lines reversed. The student services grant is actually the $500,000 amount, and the student services budget is the $10,000. I apologize for that. So the grants are about the $500,000. Business services for buildings and grounds. The operating budget each year covers all of our custodial costs, so all of our custodial supplies, our garbage services, things of that nature, any costs for routine maintenance. The capital projects line item are projects that come off of our long-range plan. And this year, we're starting the budget with $200,000. Sometimes that grows over the year as other budgets may come in under budget. Those could be future budget revisions, but $200,000 is what we felt comfortable starting with for this year. And that includes the maintenance van that we talked about last year, a floor scrubber at Meadowview, lighting at Meadowview, HVAC controls district-wide, the PA system at Meadowview that was approved last year but had some delays in installation. We have some doors, exterior doors that needed some work to function properly, and sidewalk repairs at Meadowview. The business services budget, a lot of that is costs to run our payroll and our benefits programs, including servicing fees, our various bank fees and other fees like that that we have to keep our payments going out the door. Central office, $70,000 covers all of the costs of central office, which are things like our faxing, our district-wide phones, those district-wide costs to keep the business going. last year there were some one-time costs that we are not anticipating for this year. Insurance is our business insurance. The increase here is largely due, about 20,000 of it, to workers' compensation, which is based on the injuries that happen at work. Unfortunately, we had a couple very costly injuries last year, but we continue to work to keep that as low as possible. And then open enrollment we had just discussed in the previous agenda item. Safety and security, the largest cost here is our school resource officer, but then there's also funding for if we need to purchase any ergonomic equipment or all of our safety protocols that we do for our standard response protocol. Any costs for that come out of the safety budget as well. Technology is from the technology long-range plan. There are no costs in this budget this year for replacement of any type of equipment or hardware. This really is the ongoing lease payments and software costs and things like that. There are no new initiatives in this budget. Teachers on call is our substitutes who we hire through that third party. The temporary funding are some like one-time costs that don't really fall in any of the other areas. For this year, that's training for new Montessori teachers, the sound rental for the auditorium at the high school, and then we're doing a Skyward software update that also has a financial impact, and so those are the 3 items in that temporary needs category. Utilities is based on the previous 2 years plus an inflationary index. And then the vouchers, I won't know until that October 15th aid certification. So this is rolling forward last year's voucher numbers at this year's cost. And then a small budget for our employee wellness program. And lastly, we have the governance budget, which is Board of Education, which includes the cost to run all of our elections, post all of our meetings. Grants and Communications is our website and closed captioning and YouTube and things like that. And then the superintendent budget, and there's no material changes to any of those budgets. So overall, total expenses increased just shy of $1.6 million from last year. So understanding all of that, I just wanted to make a comment that the expenses for this year, we worked very hard to keep any increases as minimal as possible. Anything I would say that we could kind of push off, we have to get the budget to where it's at that $575,000 deficit. And why I want to point this out is the chart on the left there is the budget for this year. And if I were to roll forward that same budget to next year with only changing 3 factors, which are salaries, we're looking at about a 4% cost of living this year. Health insurance, historically, we've seen about 10% increases, and our bus contract has a 5% increase built in. We also have pushed off some of our technology items 2 or more years now, and they really are at end of life, with the biggest ones being a large group of our student iPads, as well as our projectors in the Meadowview building. And so those 4 variables, if those are the only things that change for next year, you can see that next year our total expenses would increase about $2.2 million from this year. And going to look at projected revenue, what this chart is showing is the dark gray is what our current revenue limit is this year. The light gray on top is all of our other revenues, like state aid, federal aid, other than ESSER, so kind of I just lumped everything else together. And the stuff in the middle, that's the bright colors, those are the variables that would change from this year to next year. And so the first column here is 23-24. You can see I have $2 million of ESSER funding plus that $575,000 of revenue stabilization. And we don't know what next year's budget is going to do yet with Act 141, but there's 3 scenarios here. And none of them would cover the increase in expenses for next year. And so again, why I'm bringing this up is there are some expenses, there are some budget categories that we would like to spend, you know, there are additional needs, but we're being very conscious of how they roll forward into the following year. And so what that could potentially look like is this year, again, we have that $575,000 shortfall. And looking to the future, scenario number 1 is if we, again, receive the $325 increase next year. Scenario number 2 is we would get to go up to an $11,000 revenue limit. And scenario number 3 is the $11,000 revenue limit plus a $750,000 operating referendum. And in each of those scenarios, we would still have to make budget cuts the following year. So again, something to keep in perspective as we go through this year to make sure that we're not adding kind of to the shortfall for going forward. Are there any questions, feedback?
Questions or comments from board?
Yeah, I thought we didn't have a capital projects budget that, not this year, the last year. Is that true? Did that include Fund $46? How did that play out?
Yep. So last year we started the year with no budget, and then throughout the course of the year we found availability. So I'm trying to think what the projects were last year. So basically in the spring and throughout early summer, we had board agenda items where we said, you know, can we now do this? And then that capital projects line item adjusted accordingly. Chillers, yep, thank you. That was the biggest. Tennis courts, resurfacing, yep. Yep. So that $200,000 this year, typically when we get to the end of the year, if it looks like we may have some excess budget, we almost always would invest that in either our facilities through the capital projects, or sometimes we push forward some technology that's again on a long range plan, but if we can fund it sooner. And so that's what happened last year.
And one last thing, did we last year have a net zero budget with 575 going in case if we, I just want to use the right words here, in case if things got more expensive as the year went on? Is the same thought process did with this one, or?
Yep. So last year's annual meeting, I just looked at this earlier today, we thought we'd have a deficit of 560,000, and throughout the year we got that down to basically zero. So you're right, the initial budget, we always budget conservatively. And throughout the year, that's why we can then invest in capital projects and things like that. So this year we're looking a little bit more to the deficit than last year, but again, with the conservative budgeting strategies.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? Yeah.
I really appreciate the projection and the 3 options and the scenarios of what if. Do any of those scenarios account for the move of SVLA from ESSER into Fund 10?
Yep. So this chart would be the one, and I know it's hard to see up there, but the first column is 23-24, which the $2 million there is all of our ESSER funding this year. There's a few things that are a one-time thing, but the vast majority are ongoing, which would be salaries and SVLA. So this just assumes all the spending this year would roll forward to next year.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions?
Are these the slides with some changes perhaps that will be at the annual meeting? Okay.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I wanted to thank you. I've noticed over the months, over this year, for our district budgets, you've color coordinated them. They are always the same. So when we're talking blue, we're talking funds 10 and 27. And then I kind of got, wait, what's going on? So with the graph that you have on slide 15, all of the categories following that are color coded to that graph. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate that. It will help me as I digest this until the annual meeting. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And when you were going through, I did not hear you mention or talk about transportation. I don't know if I just didn't hear, or if maybe.
No, you're
that
right.
got
I
skipped.
probably skimmed right over it.
Okay.
So transportation, we did have a 5% increase this year, which is per our contract. But we were able to reduce one route. So we actually have about a $50,000 savings in transportation this year.
And then lastly, for instructional services, I don't remember which color that happens to be. I think it's the purple. No. Blue.
Blue.
Okay.
Yep.
The $80,000, that includes the new SEL curriculum that is in that.
Yep, that would be
Total
under the grant budget.
Okay, so explain to me, does that mean, oh, go ahead.
So we used several funding sources to cover our SEL resources. We used Title IV to pay for the middle school Rileyville. We used the Get Kids Ahead grant to pay for the Character Strong at the elementaries, and then we used the Dodea grant to pay for 7 Mindsets at the high school.
So those would all be included in the instructional grants line item of the $1,083,000.
Not in total, though. There are other.
Absolutely, there
purchases
are a
of
lot more expenses there than just that. Yep.
Okay, very good, thank you. At some time, I would love to know how much the SEL curriculum costs the district this year.
Sure.
I don't need that right now, though.
Yep.
Can we just add that to the weekly notes this week? Fabulous.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments from board?
I just wanted to, when you look at our projection, like Mr. McKenna said, the 3 projections also include our potential, the question that's going to be asked on the survey that's going to be hitting the mailboxes around the 16th. So hoping that this demonstrates the need for that operating as well. So I know we've had that discussion in the past, but that really showing that need for a potential operating referendum, and really excited about that entire survey results, but that operation side especially.
Leah, I'm sorry, I just have one more question about the colors and how pretty it looks.
Yeah.
On 28 and 29, could you label the scenarios? What scenario number 1 is, 2 is, and 3 is? Kind of give us, I know you explained it, but if we could see it in writing,
Yep.
that would be wonderful.
I will include that on Friday.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions? Otherwise, we can move on to 2C, financial report. Ms. Hauser.
The financial reports were attached later today in board docs, so they're there for you. Pretty much everything I just went over, though, would be covered in the financial report. So if there's any questions, otherwise we can move along.
Any questions or comment from board? All right. Let's move right along then. Going into business 3A, discussion and possible recommendation to approve Start College Now and early college credit program applications. Mr. Ford?
Evening. As was stated earlier, this is programs at the high school is the opportunity for our or virtually. And so I'm bringing to you for discussion and possible recommendation approval of the 29 College Now and 7 ETP.
And those are attached in board docs. A little bit different format. We don't have to worry about redactions that sometimes weren't always redacted. Unfortunately, we try our best, but really ultimately it's the student and what courses, number of credits, in the institution that you were looking at regardless. So we're hoping that this route, it's quicker and faster for us and hopefully a little bit cleaner for you guys as well. We're also using this data to start showing some trends. Ms. Mansky's working with the students in our library about because we own the books. So if a student goes to intro psychology, we can get that book back, we can catalog it, and if another student goes and takes that same course with the same textbook, there we go. So we're trying to streamline the whole process as well.
Yeah, please know we've had ongoing conversations about this process. We've tweaked some things along the way, continue to do so moving forward. I don't have the exact number and I apologize, but the number I'm bringing forth now is a slightly smaller number than this last year. I'm not exactly sure what accounts for that, but you may have some questions after you've seen the graphic there. If you have any, please let me know. Couple things to remember, if you don't mind me interjecting, is that just because the class is listed there does not necessarily mean that that's the class that the student's going to register for. That's what they've identified as what they would like to take. Our students fall to the bottom of the list when it comes to registration after freshmen, of course, on campus, right, enrolled, and those things usually change. Also, you may have noticed a number of students hedged their bet there and put a lot of credits that they were interested in taking. By no means are we supporting that, not necessarily from a financial standpoint only, but just from an academically successful perspective. So it's on average, a student takes 3 to 6 credits, so 2 classes a year, or excuse me, a semester. And many of these students are the same from the fall semester.
Questions, comments from board? Thank you, Mr. Ford.
I'd make a motion to recommend approval of the Start College Now and early college credit course applications under consent.
Motion, Mr. McKenna.
I'll second that.
Second from Ms. Lopez. Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Motion moves forward to the full board. Thank you, Mr. Ford.
Thank you.
All right. 3B, discussion on prevention strategies to address vaping in schools.
For this, I'd like to welcome Mr. Sands, Assistant Principal at SHS, and Mr. Ott, Meadowview Principal, along with Mr. Ford. I had some questions about, what is, the vaping. It's many schools are affected by this, not many, most likely all of them, and we had some questions about what are we doing to be proactive and maybe some reactive steps to help our students understand the dangers, and not just ones that do the vaping or do the illegal activity, but how it affects everyone else. So Mr. Ford, Mr. Sands, and Mr. Ott, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm glad that you guys are taking some time to talk about this and ask us some questions. This is a large part of what we deal with on a daily basis in the office and in our school, and has a big impact on our students. So whether it's a student that's participating in making these choices, or whether it's the students that are negatively impacted by being in spaces where these things are happening. So just to give you a heads up, most of this stuff it has moved to bathrooms. In the past, we had seen maybe in class trying to hide it in a hallway, things like that. That's not happening as frequently. So that tells me a couple things. Number one, we're doing a better job in the open spaces of our building, but at the same time, it also shows how easy this is to hide, to use. The frequency rate is extremely dangerous, in my opinion. You have an exponential or a set amount of time and puffs you can put on one cigarette, but in that same amount of time, you can put that vape to your mouth probably 3 times as many times, and the amount of the nicotine or THC, and please be clear, we are talking about THC and nicotine use in our schools in these vaping devices. So we're seeing a higher level of students. I'm not an expert, of course, but I would call it trending towards addiction and use on a regular basis and a need. So some of the things we're doing at the high school to be proactive, and some of these things we've done for lots of other things. And I've got a litany here, and I'm just going to run through them quickly because I do want you to know that we are trying to be as proactive as possible. And then we'll talk about kind of at the high school, I'll let Mr. Sands talk about kind of what happens when we talk to or have a student that is brought down to the office or comes to the office for something like this, and or when we find a device on a student, okay? So we have our Stop It app, which is an anonymous app. It's on all of our iPads. It's there for all students to use. And this is a way to report anything in the school that you are struggling with. So it has ability for us to interact on the administrative side with the students in an anonymous way, but we have a chat. There's a chat that we can use in that system. We have signs up around the school. We have TV monitors in the hallways and in the cafeteria that run, we call it a slide, just kind of a rotating number of different things that we disseminate in that way. And we talk to the kids about this. So Mr. Sands and Mr. Klaar, our Dean of Students, at the beginning of the year went through the highlights of our handbook, student handbook, and made sure that they highlighted this. We also have other signs and infographics in the hallways, also on TV monitors. Officer Erickson has been instrumental. The Monroe County Health Department has been very helpful in getting us some flyers and signs for around the school. At the high school, we've limited passing time from 7 minutes to 5 minutes, which has decreased the amount of unsupervised time in the hallways. That was coming out of COVID, and it was time to make a change there. Emails to staff, so they're up to date on kind of what to look for, things that we don't always share out with students and with families, but things that the teacher needs to be aware of, and signs. And there are some of these devices that look a particular way or are made to look like something else, so we want the teachers to be aware of that. Families and students, we do want to educate them also. So last week we sent out an email with some of this information on it, challenging our students to be upstanders and to let us know if there's something going on. Parents also, and a lot of times we do hear from parents that are worried about their kids and the kids that are struggling making these choices. Like I said, remind their students to be upstanders and to say something. This is a very passive type behavior. It's very easy to stand next to somebody while they use and me to not really care. Maybe that's because it doesn't have the secondhand smoke type issue that cigarettes does, but it's still annoying to many students and adults, and we want to hear from our students if this is happening. Our AP Dean and I walk the halls to clear the hallways and walk through bathrooms and ask everybody how they're doing and have a great day, and maybe we should move along. Teachers take a Spartan hike at the high school, so at the beginning of their prep periods, we ask them to take a lap around the school in the first 5 minutes and do some of their daily business, swing by the office, swing by a bathroom, say hello to kids, get them to where they need to be. Teachers monitor the bathrooms as to best that they are able. We stand outside of all classes, between classes. A lot of information comes from our teachers about who's going into the bathrooms on a regular basis, how long they've been in there, all those different types of things get reported back to us. We pulled study halls out of the large space in the cafeteria, put it into classrooms with the exception of, I think, 2 hours out of the day because of the size. We just needed the space. And that's helped greatly with some of our kids that are wandering, making other poor choices, but in addition to making these same choices. So my point is, made it a little harder for kids to get from point A to point B or to find a space to make some of these poor choices. We do our best to limit passes in the first 30 and the last 30 minutes of a class period. This is kind of an interesting thing. So what we've seen here this year is we're finding more and more kids meeting up then in the middle of the class period, finding ways to do that electronically by texting each other. So one of the things that we're anxious to try is we've set up a Google Doc that we're going to implement starting this Friday in our study halls. We're going to start small, and we're going to do electronic passes. What that'll do for us is then we can monitor the frequency of students using passes versus holding on to something physical, walking from point A to point B, or a written pass by a teacher, kind of old school, right? So this will give us some data we can look at. We can then also use that to restrict and say no, and let a teacher know, hey, you know what, this student frequency is increased during this hour at this time, also with their peer, and or maybe we've caught them doing this behavior, so therefore we want to limit passes on those students. The other thing that we're doing, which is very exciting, in fact, one of our staff members said that this was one of the most powerful things that they had seen as a professional. We're doing a wake-up call, and that is, we've done it in the past, actually, I shouldn't say we, it's not me that's doing it, but Monroe County Health Department sets up a room that looks like a teenager's bedroom, and then they educate the parents as they come and look at the room as to where and how some of these things are hidden or stored or those types of things in that space. And we're going to have that set up in the high school for both of our parent-teacher conferences coming up this month. So we've messaged that out for parents to come through. I'll let Mr. Ott jump in here with some middle school, and then we'll talk about kind of the reactive side and kind of the frequency at which we've dealt with this at the high school.
Good evening. Mr. Ford did a great job. We don't need to go through a lot of that again. A lot of it is very similar at the middle school. Smaller things that we've implemented, the Stop It app. We actually have our core teachers walk the students to their specials classes because we noticed that was an issue. So they are walking them downstairs because, of course, our 7th and 8th grade is upstairs. So they do walk the students down, so we constantly usually have an adult with them. I know Mr. Sanders is great at this. He has an alarm set for passing time, which is a reminder for all of us to make sure that we're out in the halls. Same thing, we have teachers get into the bathrooms as much as they can during their preps as they're moving around as well. But yeah, and again, last year we did have Officer Erickson do a similar thing at our parent-teacher conferences where he kind of held a forum type thing in the gymnasium as well. Flyers, informational things sent out beginning of the year. It's talked about with our students. I know it's kind of that fine line that we find at the middle school is, you know, is it education or are we exposing them to something that they may or may not know as we talk about it? So it's kind of one of those things that's a fine balance that we're having. We are noticing it is getting younger as well in regards to our 6th graders and 5th graders here as well that we're dealing with. We're excited. One of the things we changed this year as a proactive thing as well, well, it's not really proactive because if a student gets caught, typically it was an automatic 3-day out-of-school suspension. However, this year we've limited that to 2 days, and the 3rd day is in school where our behavior coach is working with these students, going through readings, going through the pamphlets, and they're doing activities with the students in school. So we've changed that this year to be more educational based in regards to students that, and we're actually doing it for all offenses to cut back on how many days kids are out to get them back in school. And we're educating them in the school here as well. But very similar to what Mr. Ford said, and it's a lot to monitor, and I think we probably get at least one report a day of something in regards to vaping. So again, it does take time, but again, we take everything very seriously and make sure that the cameras help a ton to make sure that we're doing that. So.
Hello, everyone. When reactive kind of measures at the high school, we do go through a due process with the student. We get there, talk to them. This comes in a variety of ways from how we find out if they've been vaping or not. We've had some issues where kids drop it out of their pockets, found in the act of doing it, so on and so forth. So we still bring them down to the office. We'll talk to them, get their side of the story, learn a little bit more about them. And what they're doing in the bathroom and so on. It is mainly at the high school a bathroom issue because the students are smart. They know that they'll be going into a place that there are no cameras, there are no monitoring to a certain degree. So we discuss the seriousness of the issue. We attack it from not only the addiction side. I like to talk to the kids about they're in their biggest decisions are coming up soon to them. from kind of what they want to become, and we don't want an addiction holding them back from missing opportunities that are there for them. That's kind of where I like to lead this the conversation, but it's also about their health and their effect on their family and their people around them. We follow up with the families. We contact. There's been, that's a tough one for the kids, obviously, when we talk with the parents and bringing them in and going from there, because sometimes they hide it well from their parents as well, and that's an eye-opening event. So there is an out-of-school suspension that comes with that, but like the middle school, we like to get them information in their hands when they come back in, pamphlets and possible next steps for them as they try to carry on. We do a referral to law enforcement for a possible municipal ticket that goes to our SRO at that time. We talk to their counselor, follows up with them, tried to help them with some healthy choices. We do, many times we have the families ask for, what other support can we do? Well, we start to think smaller and then get bigger, where we revoke the pass from classes. So we want to keep them in their classes more, and then we do check-ins as well. So just this last one I did, the parents were very happy with a couple check-ins a week, see how you're doing, keep them in the classroom, and then also contact home to get the home side of it as well, to see what are you seeing when they come home. So those are some reactive efforts at the high school.
What questions do you have?
All right. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Questions from the board? Let's go first. Mr. Hendrick?
Sure. Thank you for this. Mr. Ott mentioned that at the middle school you receive at least or approximately one report a day. How often at the high school?
That varies. I mean, we'll have some at 1 a day, or we'll jump up to 2, 3 a day. And again, that's just off the top. That's just me. They come in a variety of ways. Sometimes a student will come down to report another student. Okay. Sometimes we have not had a lot of go through the Stop It apps, but we've had a few. So it comes in a variety of ways. A lot of we've had teachers that have been out on their walks bring the student in and then reporting it that way. So it's a variety of different ways to say what kind of report it is. We know it's happening, and we're trying to, we take it serious when a student comes to us, and try to react accordingly.
And you, at one point you mentioned talking with the parents, and you also said bring in the parents.
Mm-hmm.
Do you consistently try to bring the parents in, or is that case by case, or how does that work?
Most times when you have an out-of-school suspension, or almost every time, the parents will come in and pick up the child, so we'll have a conversation at that. If we can have the parent, if the parent wishes to stay and have the conversation. Sometimes it's a situation where they want to pick up and go, and then we'll bring them in at another time if they're willing to do so.
Thank you.
Thanks. Ms. Lopez?
Thank you. So Mr. Hendricks touched on part of my question with the number of reports per day at the high school, but that does not indicate in any way the usage, correct? Okay. So how are we using the cameras that were installed outside of the high school bathrooms to help identify or monitor who's going in during the times when it can be noted that there is vaping in the bathroom?
Yep, so thank you. I think we're identifying one of the largest challenges with this issue is, and I'm not sure, I'm not being a police officer, but I think it kind of comes down to, community policing. What's the relationship? I want you to know we do not feel that it is our job to be heavy-handed, and just because somebody comes to us and says that somebody is vaping, that we are necessarily bringing that student down to the office immediately and or searching them. And that may not sit well with you, but at the same time, this is a very delicate situation in my opinion, because that's not the That's not how we care to do business. So just because somebody brings it to our attention, we do our best to address it. That can take on a lot of different formats, whether that's having a conversation with the student. If something is seen, it's a given that they're going to be in the office. We will bring them down. If it's, and maybe we'll do this differently after your input tonight, but that's how we've moved forward. So those interactions can, to answer your question, those interactions can take different forms.
So I guess from your description of your proactive and reactive strategies, I thought that perhaps it was happening with more often, but now you're telling me that that you're not having conversations.
It is happening very often.
Well, I mean the conversations with students, like the follow-up.
Yeah.
When are you not speaking to a student if you get a
No,
report?
I apologize.
Okay, I'm confused.
Sorry. It's happening a lot.
Vaping is happening
Absolutely.
a lot, right.
The anecdotal data is there that it's happening a lot. Those reports that we're getting, we don't necessarily always see those in the results of finding something on that student because of a lot of reasons. Number one, depending on the credibility of the information, like I said, it's not always, I believe, in our best interest to just go grab somebody and have a conversation. It also, if we're able to at that time, and that may result in, it does sometimes, we call a kid in or we bring them down, have a conversation about making good choices like we're talking about, and the kid owns up to it. Other times, we may know that there's something there, we got a pretty good idea, and we can't always find it. Now we have a value judgment of how we're gonna move forward, right? And we had one of these instances the other day, and the teacher knows they saw something. We went back, talked to the teacher. We're pretty confident that this is accurate information, and we were able to move forward with that. So the challenge with this is that it's easy to hide, and it's easy to pass, and you and I would probably rarely ever share the same thing when it comes to a cup or something like that, or a vape. It is not uncommon to stand around in a circle and just hand it around and to use it. So you're playing this game of trying to find this thing. But to answer your question in another way, our conversations take on a lot of different forms. So if we're hearing from a couple people that Mr. Sands is making some poor choices, we may not have the ability at that time to call him down to the office. But if there's smoke, there's fire. And I think that's a great opportunity when I see Mr. Sands in the hallway to pull him aside, ask him if he's doing all right, and ask him if he's making good choices and things like that. So those conversations take many different forms. They don't always necessarily equal the student in the office at that moment.
Back to my question about the cameras. So are the cameras being utilized?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's hard for me as a board member and a parent to hear from community members who say that students can't go to the restroom during class passing time because there is so much smoke. And I don't know if there's smoke from vapor, maybe it's just the smell, or I'm not sure. I don't think I've ever seen one before. Maybe I have, because I know that they can be hidden in other things. But we get these reports that students aren't comfortable going to the bathroom during passing time. I appreciate the proactive things that you're doing, and yet I think sometimes maybe we need to be a little heavy-handed. I don't know.
So if you don't mind, I'll address the cameras. We use the cameras all the time. So once again, we do use cameras, kids coming out of the bathroom. We were looking for something the other day, and our security camera policy in the district is that we don't actively monitor the cameras, but when we see something on it, we need to address it. So we were looking for something else, and we saw 2 students that looked like they passed something. So we went and got those students, had a conversation. We ended up turning up 2 THC vapes. So, yeah.
Other questions?
I think at the beginning, someone mentioned that this isn't just a Sparta issue, it's kind of a world issue at the moment. I mean, is there anything that other school districts are doing that they're having success at that we're not? Or are there things that unlimited funds, unlimited time, unlimited resources you think we should be doing that would actually impact this? It kind of sounds to me, the story you're telling, like we're chipping little pieces off an iceberg, or we're not causing much impact at all.
It's hard to know exactly, but at times it may feel like that. That's true. The vape sensors that we tested last year, and we did that in 1 bathroom in each of the schools, as you know. Obviously, it would be more effective if we had them in all bathrooms as a deterrent, but they still come with a lot of time. Unless you have one person standing in that bathroom, when that meter spikes and the camera goes off outside of the bathroom to identify who that student is, you have 4 people walk out. I'm not saying we don't address it, but I'm just saying it's not as simple as catching the person just because the sensor went off. Now, like I said, in all of the bathrooms, there are schools across the state that have used these. I don't know exactly how effective they feel that they are, but there's also the cost that goes with those too, right? The electronic passes is an interesting kind of an area. We looked at a company that offered these last year. They came up to about $3,000 for our student body. So we chose not to go with that at the time, but to kind of see if we could come up with something on our own. So that's like what I described. And that addresses kind of the who, what, and when, and where. That I think if we can find our bigger fish, that's our plan with that. That's going to identify the kids that are really out and about on a regular basis and making those poor choices. It's hard to know if it's an iceberg or not. When we hear the same thing that you guys hear from the community that or kids, that it's terrible. I will say anecdotally, and I'll let Mr. Sands answer for the high school if it's different than what I say, but this year we're not getting the number of reports to the office, and we're not getting the number of, we're not finding the number of vapes that we did last year. I'm not naive to say that that means there's fewer kids doing this, but that's our evidence up to this point. So as a tally, we have confiscated 7 vapes so far this year, 4 of them being THC and 3 of them being nicotine. And clearly there's more use than that going on.
Just because you said it was potentially worse last year, do you know about it around this time last year you would be? No?
We'd have to find that for you. We can get that if you'd like.
Other questions?
So you said bordering on addiction in some, although you're not an expert. Are you referring then with this last comment about less reporting? Do we think we have more or fewer students who are being impacted more by these illegal drugs?
Fewer students being impacted by them?
I mean, yes, greater, like impacted greater than.
Yeah, so I think what we're finding is, I hear what you're saying. So I think what I've noticed is the kids that we're identifying with these vapes, it's not a surprise. It's maybe a second offense. Maybe they were busted last year also. When we talk to the parents are not surprised because they've been having similar challenges at home. Very rarely do we get the story, but when you get into it, it's rarely true, but very rarely do we get this is the first time just trying it. That might be the defense that's used in the conversation with us. But when you dig into it and have more conversations, very rarely is it the kid who is experimenting in a bathroom for the first time. So I do think maybe our message is getting home to those types of students, or at least they're learning that time and place is not the right thing at school to do this. And then therefore, maybe the ones that we are identifying are the ones that are more on that addiction end or can't help themselves or use on a more regular basis or something like that.
And then lastly, students who are found with these devices, being that they're underage and illegal drugs, how does that impact the student with the co-curricular code?
Well, I can't speak to the co-curricular code as well as our activities director, but so it is illegal. We do have municipal ordinances for underage nicotine use and THC use, which THC is any age, but in the state at this time. But so when we refer to Officer Erickson, police officer, he has discretion, but I would say it's probably pretty darn close to 100% of the time that student is going to walk away with some sort of municipal ticket that accompanies that. How that affects the code, that would have to be Mr. Blaha.
Okay, so I guess I am asking that question, Mr. Blaha, if that's okay. I mean, underage drinking, there are repercussions for that. Are there repercussions with the co-curricular code for THC use at school?
Yes, so whether it's a lookalike or an actual, our co-curricular code gives the first offense typically 1/3 of their season, and if they would pay for a course and complete that, they could reduce it to 10%.
And these are being applied?
Yes, we have a couple typically each season.
Thank
Just wanted to address, Mr. Rod, do you know how many vapes you've confiscated this year?
Hopefully Mr. Russ does. I sent it to him. I don't have it off the top of my head.
I do. For September 7, 5 of them were coded, were THC, and 2 of them were nicotine.
So very similar to the results of the high school.
Can you say that one more time? 5?
7 total. 5 were coded with drugs, so that means they're THC, and then 2 of them were tobacco or nicotine.
That was Meadowview, right?
Yes.
Okay. Other questions from board? I think I had a couple questions I was going to ask. You talked a little bit, Mr. Ford, about some of the collaborations maybe with Monroe County and Health Department, Officer Erickson. What does that look like in that? How does the health class curriculum tie into what the message the students are getting, what support? And then I was hoping to learn more about those partnerships with our public health experts, right? Like, what does that look like when it comes beyond, maybe that demo sounds like it'd be great throughout the year, more of the ongoing type of collaborations there.
Well, I can speak real quickly, and I did forget that. I did speak with Miss Cast, our health teacher, today, knowing this was happening tonight. It is taught in 8th grade, and she's looking at bringing it into the lower grades in 7th grade and her 5th grade health class as well. So she's looking at what that looks like for those grades, and she does hit on it.
And these healthy choices and healthy lifestyles are hit on in multiple areas in our PE classes and in our health classes. So this is, students are getting this information their freshman year. We, through our PBIS lens, we also work on these types of things. The specific connections with Monroe County, I have not sat down with them in a while. Mr. Officer Erickson has been our liaison there. I've kind of asked him to reach out and find some resources, and like Mr. McKenna was asking, just looking for anything else that can work and that somebody else might be doing. So he's helped us out greatly. In fact, he just identified another resource today that he was excited about, some handouts and things like that. So, but our curriculum definitely supports healthy choices in multiple areas and in health and PE.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. I envisioned some of those panels with former users, or right, like kind of Mr. Sands was talking about, impact on some of those bigger life choices?
Yeah, Ms. Iverson brings in a number of guest speakers. I can't speak without checking with her if she does or has brought in any past addicts or anything like that. None come to mind at this time, but she may.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments from board?
Yeah, thank you guys for helping kids make good choices, right? Because that's what we have to do.
Good luck. Thank you too. All right. Thanks, folks. What are we on? 3C, discussion to possibly revise policy 7510.
So we just brought this forward. There's some questions about our facility use with some of our clubs and activities and organizations. Over the summer, we transitioned to what's called FMX, which is a program that oversees our facility use program. So if I wanted to reserve one of our facilities, whether it's a gym, classroom, or whatever our district facilities are, I would go onto our website into the FMX side and go through that route. Our current practice, and it's always been our current practice, one of the things that we're finding is that this FMX, we can set it up the way we want. And one of those important check boxes to getting things set up, rather than what is the name of the program, who's in charge, what are you using it for, dates and times, is do you have liability insurance? And that was one thing that we've always asked for, but our past program, we didn't have a really good surefire way to confirm that. Now we do have a surefire way to confirm that through FMX. So one of the things that we put in place, and we worked with our clubs, specifically our booster clubs that did not have that liability insurance, is the importance of doing that. Educating, I met with the basketball club specifically and the theater club to explain why that is. And after looking at and getting our feedback from our liability carrier, it's very clear that our carrier is only liable for our organizations that we have direct control over, not our booster clubs. So, and we explain, if I reserve it under hypothetically the soccer booster club and say, hey, I want to run an open gym, the soccer booster club doesn't have liability insurance and my name's on it, I'm personally liable. And nobody wants to take on that liability, and the school district doesn't want to set people up for that kind of liability. So we do have an administrative rule behind this, and we'll be looking at, making sure that that's clear and that sort of thing. That is directed by, a district administrator, and Ms. Hauser worked with Mr. Blaha and Ms. Nelson and got some feedback from the clubs in regards to how to reserve our facilities. We are very close to rolling out a procedure that that has very clear step processes about if I wanted to even reserve the facility for a school-sponsored event. I have to go through a checklist, and FMX, I can click that, yep, I understand, because I need to understand what happens in an emergency. I need to understand what happens if the toilet overflows. I need to understand how to lock up the facility. These are during non-custodial hours. That's the biggest question, because if I reserved the gym on a weekend, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to repair a toilet, and I know Mr. Ford's more handy, but I need a line. I need somebody to call if something goes wrong, or if there's an emergency that's more than that doesn't involve 911. So we're working on that. We're going to roll it out, and it's also our goal is to roll it out to booster club members that not our employees. Right now, our employees can reserve a gym off hour or on hours too, but specifically off hours. We're looking to expand that to other booster club members who are not necessarily an employee of ours, and they would go through that same program. So we just wanted to bring this forward to give a little bit more explanation about the why behind it, and just if there's any questions or anything that you would possibly want to move forward, this is a discussion item only. Ms. Hauser, did I forget anything? Okay.
So no administrative recommendation either way?
There's no action item, and it's just more of a discussion item.
Okay.
So I have a question for you, though, just for clarification. Are we saying that the need for the liability insurance requires a amendment to the facility or to the policy?
No, it's not. It's in there already. Each user shall have evidence of insurance. That's already in there, and that's our recommendation is to keep that in there.
But the way I would read this policy is A, B, and C apply to non-school sponsored groups or for non-school sponsored activities, and a booster club is a school sponsored group? No.
No, it is not. It is it is a group. I'll let Ms. Hauser speak to this one.
Yep. So when I reached out to our liability carrier, that policy is alluding to, we have a different board policy that says our board recognized groups, but when you compare that with our insurance policy, that doesn't grant them coverage under our insurance policy. So our insurance policy only covers activities that are under the direct control of the district. So if the booster club had an activity, but say I was directly supervising it, authorizing all the different activities, taking responsibility for them as a district employee, then it would be covered. But if, let's say, I'm part of the Sparta Baseball Club board and the Sparta Baseball Club were to use a facility, I'm not acting on behalf of the district, I'm acting on behalf of a board member, then I would need to provide liability insurance. So under our insurance policy, whether a group is board recognized or not is not the determining factor. It's whether the event is under the direct control of the district. So the wording of board recognized can take part in, do we charge them a fee or things like that, but from a liability standpoint, our policy needs to drive the decision.
Thank you.
Yep.
Questions?
Comments again more than anything. I'm not thrilled with the insurance change. I get why it's there. I'm not happy about it because these clubs are going to be paying for insurance apparently that they should have had for the last 20 years and they didn't have, and there was nothing that we accrued as far as liability, even though we had kids that got major injuries and people that had slips and falls and whatever. These are the same clubs that are out in the community trying to raise money every weekend. End of the day, this is the parents of our kids who are paying more and getting exactly the same thing back. I like it when the dollars that we spend actually have impact. I see none in this. The big issue I have with this entire thing, I feel like in a lot of ways we're trying to become guardians of our facilities. You know, we're saying that we want to make sure that people use them, but in practicality and reality, it's very difficult. I had a person reach out to me extremely frustrated because in order to get a youth basketball team with 9 kids, a gym space took over 2.5 months. Each time a request was submitted, it was sent back with a reason of why we couldn't grant it. Then we went through the step to correct that, sent the request again, and it came back with another one. That just seems crazy to me. If somebody sends in a request and there's 5 things wrong, list 5, grab them by the hand, help them, walk them through exactly what they need to do. These are people who are trying to help our kids. I don't care if it's school district sponsored, I don't care if it's club, I don't care if it's 259 or 301, it's the same kids. They're our kids. I mean, if you want to talk about something that causes frustration and makes 335 people leave, this is it. You're taking people who are passionate about something and they're trying to share their passion with kids. We got gym space that's open. We got school district employees that are willing to take kids into the building and they're blocked because some box isn't checked. It just seems nuts. No matter what we try to reach out and get volunteers for, but finding volunteer coaches is almost impossible. The people who do it, let's make sure we make it easy for them. They're trying to help our kids. I can understand. I mean, I don't like it, but I'll swallow the insurance thing. It's okay. I don't understand how a request takes 10 weeks to fulfill. We have to make it easy. We're talking about doing a referendum of $120 million to include a three-place gym. We're talking about that gym because we want to have our community involved, and we want to have our community in our facilities. But it takes 10 weeks to submit a request. That sounds crazy. Why would the people who want this gym care if we built it if they can't use it anyway? Everything in here, is written and it says district administrator shall. I don't think we can write a board policy for this, other than to say we want people to use our facilities. It's not that we will permit them. We want them to. I want people in our buildings because these aren't our buildings. We may be supervising them right now, but they built them. Let's let them use them.
Thanks, Mr. McKenna. Anything else? Yeah, go for it.
For me, I found these situations with these policies that we've recently approved incredibly frustrating. During our workshops, this one included, we have conversations like, are there any changes? Does this create a change? Does this add administrative burden? Does this do something new or different? And the answer is no. But in reality, it does, because we required our clubs that we endorse to obtain insurance that they were supposed to have before, but never did. Now we endorsed new clubs last year, and these fledgling clubs have to come up with funds for insurance. I feel like there's a communication error here. That's incredibly frustrating when community members reach out to me and say, well, did you know this? And I say, that's not what I imagined when this policy came to fruition. And I agree with Mr. McKenna that these buildings were paid for by our taxpayers, and they belong to them. And they have every right to have access to them when they're not being used for education purposes. At least that's my thought process. We need to make it as easy as possible. And I know it's not an action, but I would love for the district, and I did ask this in an email, to see if it would be possible for us to have a rider that would cover, at the very least, our endorsed clubs, the ones that are covered under the other policy I don't remember the number, 2170 or something. But, I feel like, why are we increasing the burden on our parents and our coaches and our board members when it could be something as very simple as a rider on a policy? I used to sell insurance. We did it all the time. I don't know if that would be a cost to the district or not, but I would really like us to look into seeing if that would be an option.
Thank you. Other comments, questions? I think one question I had, Mr. Russ, the way I read it, basically every proposal still was able to be, I forget where it was, under district administrator, approved or exceptions made depending on the proposal. Is that, so the way I'm hearing that, would Mr. McKenna's 9-person practice, would that carry different weight than a 12-team tournament, for example? Like, can you share a little bit about how that would play out with the way it's currently written?
Yeah, there's different types of activities. There is in the administrative rule that we could look for a waiver for one or two groups, and Ms. Hauser, please correct me if I'm wrong. Those are for, I would say, a meeting. Hey, we want to get the board together, we want to have a booster club meeting, can we rent a classroom? Can we go into the cafeteria? Can we do this? Can we do that? However, when you start to get to a practice, when kids are active, kids are moving, and more opportunities for injury, those are the times that we want to make sure that we have those liability insurance opportunities for that. Those are the biggest ones where we need to see, is the risk greater? And we have to relegate that risk. So a huge basketball tournament on a Saturday, there's a lot of risk there. A basketball practice, usually if it's nine members, it's usually, I'll say basketball, it's under the SBA, which there's additionally another team of 9, another team of 9, another team of 15, so it really compounds in those groups. And so we're not really looking at a private organization from an AAU looking to use our gym facility, because they would have to have the insurance and they'd go through that same process. And they're not a group one, they're not a group affiliate. So we're really looking at these larger groups that bring in these physical activity to be covered by their own liability, to protect our entire district and protect our facilities, to make sure that they're being used properly, making sure that we're being good stewards of our facilities as well, rather than letting just everybody. I'm not saying what we did in the past was wrong. However, this was put into place in January. We put in our new system over the summer. And I'm not sure if that system was, we were looking at we're always looking to see if we can streamline some things. FMX also has our facility, has our tech request, has our, transportation. So we lumped everything into one system to make it more effective and more efficient for our stakeholders, our staff, and to be more fiscally responsible as well, to reduce time and be more valuable. So if a group wants to have a board meeting in a classroom, most likely we would say, yep, come on in. But these organizations now will have liability insurance moving forward, so they'd be covered on that one as well.
Thank you.
Do we have any idea what the total cost was to these clubs to add liability insurance?
I believe a quote gave me, don't quote me if I'm wrong, pardon the pun, about $1,000 per club.
How many recognized clubs do we currently have?
I can get that list. I can get the club list. I got it right here. I'm looked in the policy. We have, let's see, 4 parent-teacher parent-teacher organizations, 3 governing boards, and 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 activities in athletics. Article 9211, or policy, sorry.
And are we requiring parent-teacher organizations to have the liability insurance?
I believe that we are as well.
Mr. Russ, what type of activity would a parent-teacher organization have that would require liability? I mean, I'm really missing something.
I believe in the past they've had some fun fairs, some bringing in bounce houses and things that are sponsored after school. I don't know a specific, but I recall those in the past being activities that some parent-teacher organizations have.
So it's likely that they may not have those activities if it requires insurance, but if they don't have those activities, we wouldn't require them to have insurance. Or they're required regardless. Anyone who wants to rent our I'm confused, I'm sorry, because you had said if you're coming in for a meeting, you don't need insurance, but if you're a PTO club and or a PTO and you would just have a meeting, you don't need insurance. But then if you have bounce houses and you're raising funds or activity or awareness or health and wellness, anything, you have to have insurance.
That's what we're asking, yep.
Unless it's in coordination with, say, the building where per our insurance policy, not per board policy, the direction is the event is under the direct supervision and control of the district. So if the event is, let's say the building principal is planning the event right alongside the PTO and going through all the steps and doing everything under the privy of the district, then it could be negotiable, I would say. But if it's the building is not involved in it and the outside group is coming in and planning it all on their own and we're basically just providing the space, then they would need their own insurance. So PTO is probably a little bit in the gray area because typically there is heavy teacher and principal involvement, but it really solely based on the insurance policy comes down to, does the district have direct control of the event?
The insurance policy hasn't changed, just the way that we can track it has changed, correct?
The insurance policy has not changed. However, the guidance and they are emphasizing that districts need to be watching. The carriers are emphasizing this much more than they had previously. So this is, I guess I'd say like a big topic of conversation and something that they're wanting to ensure that districts are doing. And so basically they called attention to it.
Do they also sell insurance? I'm sorry.
So at this point, those 20 or so recognized activities have secured the liability insurance or in the process, or do we know what the status is?
I only know of one for certain that did.
I was told of another one that's going to be getting it very shortly here. I don't know how many have already submitted. I'm out of that loop, but
Just for the sake of discussion, can we name those groups or that have gotten insurance?
I know the theater group is very close to getting insurance. I know that, and I was told the basketball club is actively seeking as well. I don't know where they're at with that process.
Well, I think it's particularly, I understand the need for the insurance, and I don't question that at all. However, I think it's counter intuitive or counter to what we want to accomplish when we have our parent-teacher organizations requiring them to have that liability insurance. So if it's true that we could cover all these groups at the cost of about $20,000 or so, I would suggest that we have that conversation in the near future to see if possibly that's something we could work into our budget.
I would agree with that.
Future agenda item?
Just at first thought, if we did something like that, I think it would have to be a Fund 80 expense because it's not for our core educational programming, so it wouldn't be state aid eligible. So I don't know if it's eligible Fund 80 cost, but I think if we did do something like that, that's where we'd have to have the discussion as Fund 80, which then would be a levy assessed directly for that purpose.
Okay. Because we couldn't just if we happened to have some extra money in Fund 80, use it for that purpose, it would have to come up at the annual meeting as something that
I would have to verify with DPI.
Would you check on that for us, please?
Yep.
And could that be an action item at the upcoming annual meeting, or is that just, has that ship sailed?
Definitely could be an action item. The annual meeting is where, so currently Fund 80, I'm presenting the same 3 expenses as previously, but that's the community's opportunity to say, we also want you to do this or that, and I'm recommending a levy of $10,000 to do that, or so on. So as far as working it proactively into the annual meeting, I'm basically working on all those presentations right now, but it definitely could be something we get the verbal discussion with at the annual meeting, and then when you approve the levy at the following board meeting, then that could be included.
Okay, so if you could, not that you don't have enough to do, but if you could, at some point in the future, determine what the fiscal impact would be of another, let's say 25,000, just to be safe, into that fund, what that would translate to for cost, please.
Will do. Yep.
Thank you.
So I just want to be clear here, because I don't know exactly where we could limit towards Fund 80, but based on that, I don't know where we want our goal to be. If we want to cover everyone, or do we just want to cover our student-led groups, like our basketball club or our gridiron or whatnot?
I think we need
But-
to have some control over that, and that's where the recognized group list would come into play.
So I just want to be clear, our student-run groups that are, like say DECA or FBLA, those are covered because those are under direct control of the district. Or the high school varsity basketball team, they would be covered for what they hold. This is the booster clubs who are 99%, if not 100% serving our kids, but they have their own governing boards or what have you. So they're like their own nonprofit, say, organization. So anything that's under the direct control of the district, that'd be all your school sponsored athletics and your like DECA, FBLA, so on. Those have no issues from an insurance standpoint.
Maybe I should re-reference the question, because I'm right on the, we're both right on the booster club thing. I'm just wondering, to my knowledge, you can't turn anyone in the community or the schools away based on Fund 80, or am I wrong on that? Because I know, like, for example, we're kind of getting into the weeds here, but for our middle school program, we allow people not associated, or children
following
not
you.
associated, or
So you're referring to, for it to be eligible Fund 80 cost, it has to be open to the community, and if we limit it to specific groups, are we no longer open to the community?
yes.
That is a question I will follow up on when I see if this is eligible with DPI. Yep.
Ms.
Any
Hauser?
other comment?
Oh, thank you. If I could just say one more thing, and I don't want to beat a dead horse. I know everything with the district is complicated, the budget, insurance, everything. And I did not write commercial lines, but I still am, I would really, really appreciate it if a conversation could be had with our insurance carrier, if our district support organizations, the ones covered under 9211, could be named insureds on a rider for liability purposes under the district's insurance policy. I know with personal lines, they do it all the time and there's no additional cost. So I would just appreciate that conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good discussion. Any other comments? All right. Thank you all. Appreciate it. All right. Let's move on to 3D, Discussion, possible recommendation, increase vacation days for full year classified middle management staff in the SASD employee handbook.
Yes, looking at some local comparables that we have for this is full year classified in full year middle management positions only. We looked at the comparables and noticed that our vacation days were lacking when we start looking at our local comparables. So currently, we'll look at middle management first for full year. Once again, this is full year. They currently have 12 days of vacation. And they can also, all of our employee classes can roll over that are full year, can roll over up to 80 hours or basically 2 weeks. But for middle management, looking at our comparables, that is basically far behind others, and Ms. Hauser shared it with the board earlier today. And so our recommendation would be to go from 12 to 20 days. And then after 5 years of service, an additional vacation day would be added for a maximum of 25 days. And those are vacation days and those are years of experience in our district to do that. And then looking at the classified, they currently start at 10 days. And then and we would be looking at putting that up from 10 to 15. And then after 5 years of service to the district, an additional vacation day be added to a maximum of 20 days. Once again, this is looking at our comparable district data. Some questions may come up about, can we vary this in anything? Yes, we can. There's a lot of variations to this, but this is just an idea that we came up with to make us more comparable and more competitive with our local districts. So, one other thing, I know Mr. Scholz, he's not necessarily able to be here today, but he said that one recommendation that he would maybe talk about is maybe, let's see, I'm reading this, that middle management, he's fine, but classified start at 10 and then start immediately with one per year rather than going from 10 to 15 and with a maximum of 20. So some variations there. We think that this is the cleanest to get us to what we need to do right away for both the full year classified and the full year middle management.
All right, thank you. Questions, comments from the board?
Can you read Tony's recommendation again?
Tony's thought, oops, of course I clicked the wrong button. I believe was to start to, he's fine with middle management as an idea, was to the 20 days. However, for classified, start at 10 days and then add 1 year of vacation for every year of service starting immediately at year 2.
Okay.
As an idea.
But that would mean, and just to be clear, if he wrote that right, that would mean after someone with 10 years of service, they would have their full 20?
19.
Or 19?
They'd have 19, yep.
So 11 years, they'd have their full 20.
Yep. That's the way I understand what he mentioned in an email today as an idea. Once again, there's a lot of ideas. We're looking to increase these days per our comparables.
I wouldn't necessarily strongly oppose this. My concern is looking at a benefit in isolation and outside of our typical negotiation period. I'm just wondering if we looked at all benefits, are there areas where we're stronger than other districts and other districts are stronger than us, and now we're kind of just taking this one aspect. So that's just my comment.
You mentioned negotiation, Mr. Hendricks. This is non-negotiable. This is not part of the negotiation.
Okay.
This is,
thank you, of course.
So you're saying you'd like to see more benefits included? Is that what?
We would like to see this benefit increase to our full year classified and our full year middle management, yes.
Are you going to go, Mr. McKenna?
I believe middle management full year, I think that's 19 people. That would have no budgetary impact, I believe. But how many classified staff are we talking about, and have you figured the budgetary impact of that?
There is no budgetary impact on this.
I'll add to that. For, let's say, a custodian, there would be no increased budgetary impact. However, we could potentially have subs for more days. So some of our year-round positions, we get subs and some we don't. We have a very shallow sub pool unfortunately, for a lot of our year-round classified. So no, I don't have an exact number for you because we don't always fill every vacancy, but there could be a budgetary impact with substitute cost for classified.
And how many year-round classified staff do we have?
I would say under 50. Most of our custodians, most of our building secretaries, our computer techs, and that's about it. Probably, yeah, I'd say 30 to 40, just kind of roughing it in my head.
Any other questions, comments from board?
I guess I'm wondering, if I may, and maybe this is what Mr. Hendricks was alluding to, I'm not sure, but how does this compare to certified staff and their time off? And at what point would we need to, would their benefits in terms of vacation be reviewed or requested to be reviewed if we make these changes?
So full year certified staff are administrators. There's no teachers or anything like that. And currently full year certified is you start at 22 years and then after 22 days. And then you earn, after 5 years of service, you earn 1 extra day up to 30 total.
Out of the gate, you have 22?
22 for full year certified, for full year administrators, yes. We're not looking to change that at this time.
And the question did come up, why is this on our radar kind of thing, or how did this come up? It came up from employee feedback. I had questions from more than a few classified staff this year. Again, as we've begun asking for more feedback in compensation and in employee benefits and things, this is something that has come up for quite a while, that really what they want me to look at is vacation time. And so Sam and I talked, and what harm does it get to pull the data from other districts? And when I did that, I found that we did have some discrepancies, and as they network with other districts, they hear and they learn, and as their coworkers moved to other districts and still talk to them, and they were just hearing that other districts were doing better. And so I looked into it and confirmed that, and that's where this recommendation came from.
In order to move this discussion forward, I'll make the motion to recommend to the full board the changes that are listed but not on the consent agenda.
Motion, Mr. Hendricks. Recommend changes as presented, not on consent. Okay.
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Wells. Any further discussion or questions, comments from board? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. All right. Motion passes to the full board at the end of the month. Thank you. 3E, discussion possible recommendation to give the full year's allotment benefit of paid leave, personal days, and vacation days at the beginning of the contract year and the SASD employee handbook.
So currently, this is for classified staff. When a new classified staff member is onboarded, they currently get paid leave, personal day, and vacation days if it's applicable. Every pay period, they get it allocated to their leave, to their bank, which they can see on Family Access. So right now it's every 2 weeks they get a little more, they get a little bit more. What we're recommending is to make it everyone the same, because right now certified staff, when they get onboarded with us, they get their full allotment. They get their 10 paid leave days, their 2 personal days. When administrators come on board, they get their vacation days, everything like that. So we're looking to stay consistent with all of our employee groups, with them getting their allocated of paid leave, vacation, if needed, in personal days right away, to keep all the employee classes consistent. The question comes up is, do we have people that overuse their sick days? So if I get hired in September, I give my 10 sick days, I take 10 sick days, and I leave before my contract or my work agreement ends. Yes, we actually ask for that money to recoup because they didn't earn it all the way. So we currently do that right now, whether it's certified staff or classified staff, and they do it, and that would continue. So just because you're giving the allotment doesn't mean that you can use it all and leave early to do that. So we're looking to stay consistent with all of our employee classes. Ms. Hauser, anything else you wanted to add to that one?
And Mr. Russ, you said we ask for it back, but you have the ability to actually deduct it. Is that
We
correct?
can deduct, and if they still haven't had that enough to deduct, we can move to small claims court if needed. But we try so hard to get everything back, plans if needed. But we have moved forward.
And which group is primarily affected by this change, just to be clear?
Classified staff.
So I guess the benefit that I see in this is a more even vacation use. If people are earning throughout the year, they're not going to take vacation until they've earned enough to take a vacation, which means you're going to get all your vacations in the second half of the year. Downside is the recoup. I'm wondering if we could allow people to go negative on their vacation fund with supervisor approval. If we earned the same way, person has 3 days earned, they want to take a 5-day vacation, supervisor approves it, they go -2 or -16 hours, however you wanted to track it. I think it would accomplish the same thing, but that time would be more on a supervisor's radar. They'd be able to see where they were at and be able to track it easier. Most likely the good, I hate to use that term, the long-term employee that isn't a problem with, but if you had somebody who was thinking about an exit, that might be a marker that the supervisor could then have a conversation with them.
I know the supervisor, as they approve, can see automatically how many days they have left and how many that. You can go in there and you click on the employee, and it will show you everything past history with that, along with, so the system is set up so if Ms. Hauser decides to take a vacation day on Friday, I can click on Ms. Hauser. On the right there, it says how much time she's used and how much time is left, and then I click on her name, and it will list every paid leave or in service that is there. So the supervisors have that right there as well.
Other questions, comments?
I definitely like the idea of families being able to take vacation when, they've earned it throughout the years. And like Mr. McKenna said, not having it heavy in one quarter or another. But I am worried about the administrative burden that puts on our staff to recoup that, and how much money we would actually not be able to recoup, and what that does for, you know, just what people say about Sparta in general. I did ask Ms. Hauser how much, if she could estimate how much money needed to be recouped for other purposes throughout the last couple of years if we had this policy in place, and you said not very much money, but
Yep. So, with vacation, we haven't had to recoup that in past years, but we have had to recoup paid leave because paid leave, they do get all up front. And so we do have that data for how many times we've had to recoup paid leave. And I just talked with payroll today, and it's been maybe 5, give or take a few each year, which they're typically probationary employees or employees who are pretty new to the district, and they tend to use it all right away before they really have any years of service in. And so when we talked about that, you know, with vacation time, supervisors can monitor all of that, and vacation is still has to be approved by a supervisor. So if they have some concerns, as always, we'd, you know, tell them to reach out to me or Sam, and we could kind of talk them through the different options for approval and things like that. What Mr. McKenna mentioned is exactly why this recommendation came forward. This is also one that I heard a lot of staff feedback, and it's actually the staff feedback that prompted looking at it and seeing if we should revise it. And from a business standpoint, it's much better because, again, if they're positions with substitutes and they're all taking the vacation in the same quarter, that leaves us very shorthanded from a district standpoint. So as far as recouping, yes, there's a little bit of more work in it, but not to the level that I think it would be a big burden.
what is the probationary period for classified staff? Or maybe it's not different for any other staff.
Yep,
but
1 year.
1 year. So could they get it at the beginning of their second year
Sure.
instead of during the first?
Yep.
Other questions, comments? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion.
I would make a motion to recommend to the full board to give the full year's allotment of benefit of paid leave, personal days, and vacation to classified staff after the probationary year, so at the beginning of their second year of employment.
Motion from Ms. Lopez,
I'll second that.
second from Mr. Wells. Any more discussion, comments, questions from the board?
In effect, though, isn't that the system we have right now? I mean, granted that it comes in increments, but they don't get their full allotment until they've completed their probationary year.
But then the second year, they would get the entire that year's vacation paid time at the beginning and not have to have it allotted to them over the year and pay every paycheck.
So,
Is that correct?
I-
That's what I'm thinking.
yeah, I think the best way to explain it is, so I know where I work, starting January 1, we get our vacation. And then we just have the entire year to use it. But based on what I'm seeing is that when we onboard a certified staff, instead of them making up numbers here, instead of them getting full year or full week on January 1, they'd slowly accrue that until December 31 and then get full vacation second year, full vacation third year, and so on. So it's technically separate, because then we avoid having bad actors. We would avoid having bad actors that would end up taking their vacation time, all their vacation time leaving, and then us having to go to small claims, versus they actually have to work that full year to get what they need, and then they'll accrue it from there. By any chance, is it a use it or lose it kind of deal? Like if we're getting to the end of the, like at December 31, like they end up losing it all, like if they accrued that last day or whatnot.
They can carry over up to 80 hours each from one fiscal year to the next, and then anything over the 80 hours is lose it. So we don't pay out unused vacation time until time of separation. So if they were to quit, retire, so on, we pay it out, but otherwise it's, you can roll 80 and then use it or lose it. 80 hours.
Has administration ever investigated the possibility of paying out vacation time?
No.
Would you be opposed?
It would be a budgetary impact potentially. So carry up to 10, but paid out for 5, for example. That would be a budgetary impact. You'd have to assume that all administrators would be paid an extra week. Classified would be paid an extra week. Basically, any year-round person could possibly be paid an extra week. And the other side would be is that we give these vacation days, this allotment, and we want their employees to use those times that they have them, and we want them to use it. And if I do not use it all, that's on me. I've chosen that, knowing that I would not get paid out on that. So, but personally, I'd love it because I'd be one of those people that to do that, and that would be fine. If the board wants us to explore that we could get a budgetary impact with that. Probably pretty relatively easy in the next couple weekly notes to get that if you wanted that.
Well, we just increased vacation days with the idea that there was no budgetary impact. And so I'm not sure we want to go down that road at this time. So where are we? We have a motion?
We got a motion for full benefits allotted after probation.
Yes.
And then it was first and seconded by Mr. Wells.
The reason I made that recommendation is because I feel like after that first year, we've established a relationship with the employee, and if they're coming back and they're signing that contract, then most likely they're going to continue with us. And if it's within that first year, any number of things could happen. Maybe it's not even, maybe they don't even have, maybe their intent is good, but the circumstances just are such that they leave us. And then I just think it makes more sense personally. That's why I made that recommendation.
Any other comments? Questions?
Is it a recommendation that administration's opposed, or the motion is administration opposed to it? Is it kind of beat in the middle?
Opposed to that idea? No. I would like to check with payroll just to see the capabilities of our software, because I don't know what I would be signing them up for with the tracking. And along those same lines, we typically change our vacation allocations every July 1. So with the understanding our classified staff, we hire at any time throughout the year. I just want to double check and run by for the feasibility. So I'm not opposed to the idea. I just want to see what it takes on the back side of it.
So if it's okay, I didn't hear consent to possibly keep that off consent, and then we could come back and look at it. The only thing that I'm not opposed to it, besides looking into it, I know when I drive around and listen to the radio, a lot of people are hiring and they paid vacation starting immediately. Everything, all the benefits are given up front. Now they're recouping them if they leave, but one of those things you hear on the radio is, hey, you get 2 weeks of paid, you get 2 weeks of vacation started immediately. So, but I think it's a benefit to our employees. Once again, I'm not disagreeing with you. And would it help with the recouping? Ms. Markman's probably saying yes. Yes, she is. But I think that's something we can look into about the feasibility. The hard part is what Ms. Hauser said. Everybody's probation starts differently, and then when we redo everything on, on July 1, that's a little bit easier than the payroll, rather than all of us being hired at different, and then payroll has to do all those things.
And you did not have that on consent,
I did
correct?
not have it on consent, no.
Perfect. So, any other questions, comments? Otherwise, we can go to a vote. All those in favor to move the motion forward as recommended by Ms. Lopez, with the benefits and paid leave kicking in at that second year or after the probationary period to the full board, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. All right, motion moves forward to the full board. Thank you. Thanks for looking into those too. Super helpful. All right, where are we at? 3F, announcements, information.
Yes, and I'm sure the Packers are kicking a field goal as we speak now, going off of what, Colin, you said, kicking in. So I'm whatever. Anyway, good first month of school. We wind into the second month as autumn comes in. Kids working very hard. We're wrapping up our fall co-curriculars, both at middle and high school, and looking forward to our concert season specifically. We have our choir getting ready. Our bands typically wait until after the marching season to go, but we also have the musical coming up and the start of winter activities. So a lot of positivity going on in the classroom. They're working very hard. We're working through our initial maps round across the district, and our teachers are creating their SLOs for the most part on those data, and so is our administrators. So a lot of positivity, a lot of positive communication, trying our best to make sure that we're up front and being that communicating, being proactive rather than reactive. A couple notes, community survey. It's going to be hitting the mailboxes around the 16th. That is moving forward. Our staff will be getting an email this week, and then our families will be getting an email as well with all that information to take the survey electronically as well, and encouraging them to use that paper ballot that they get in the mail for a possible other another elector or a person who can vote in the household. So that's coming out. Looking forward to those. They got to be done by November 9th, I believe, if memory serves me. And looking forward to those results. Annual meeting a week from Thursday. Looking forward to having that. I know Ms. Hauser is working very hard with in her office, and we're looking to put on the finishing touches of the book and getting that all ready. But that'll be at 6:30 at Meadowview here, and that'll be a meeting of the electric. It is not a formal board meeting by any means. However, we will put some, we will notice it since we all will be here, so everyone knows that it's there as well. A full board meeting on the 23rd, and then we have the two soups with the soups to talk about the facility. It's really just to take questions and answer any questions that may come and have a discussion, but it's really to go through the survey, survey and then take those questions. So those are on the 24th and 26th, and then in November, December, we have our committee of the whole and the full board.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Russ. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. McKenna. Second by Mr. Hendricks. All those in favor, say aye. All opposed, say no. All right. We're closed. Thank you, folks.